In the sprawling tapestry of global wealth, technology, and humanitarian ambition, few figures embody the synthesis of intellect, strategy, and moral responsibility as completely as Bill Gates, whose evolution from a brilliant software prodigy into one of the most influential philanthropists in human history offers a rare glimpse into how capital, innovation, and long-term thinking can converge to reshape not only industries, but the trajectory of global development itself. And to understand the full scope of Gates's philanthropy and investment portfolio, we must look beyond the familiar narratives of Microsoft's rise and examine the deeper architecture of a man who built an empire on code, then chose to reposition that empire as a tool for confronting disease, poverty, climate change, and systemic inequity across continents. Born with an early fascination for logic, patterns, and computational possibility, Gates co-founded Microsoft in 1975 with Paul Allen, transforming personal computing from an esoteric hobby into the backbone of modern life. And his decades as CEO forged not only a software giant, but an unparalleled base of wealth that, once accumulated, became the raw material for what would eventually become the largest private philanthropic effort the world has ever seen. Yet Gates's story of giving did not begin with the headline announcements of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It began with a quiet, almost mathematical recognition that his money could do more good in the hands of scientists, doctors, educators, and engineers than sitting dormant as personal fortune, a realization shaped by his affinity for data, rationalism, and the pursuit of measurable impact. By the early 2000s, as Microsoft matured and Gates stepped back from day-to-day operations, he began to redirect his formidable analytical mind toward global health, examining disease burdens not through sentiment, but through statistics, cost-effectiveness studies, and the cold arithmetic of lives saved per dollar spent. And it was this evidence-driven perspective that led him to identify infectious diseases, HIV, malaria, tuberculosis, polio as high-leverage targets where strategic intervention could alter the fate of entire nations. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, formally launched in 2000, grew rapidly into a global powerhouse, operating with the precision of a world-class think tank and the funding muscle of a mid-sized country, pouring billions into vaccine research, agricultural innovation, sanitation, maternal health, financial inclusion, and education reform, all guided by Gates's conviction that scientific progress and technological scaling are the most efficient ways to lift billions of people out of suffering. And yet, even as the foundation expanded, Gates's personal investment portfolio followed a parallel path, shaped by his belief in diversification, structural resilience, and long-horizon value creation. For contrary to the perception that he lives entirely inside philanthropy, Gates has constructed one of the most sophisticated investment portfolios in the world, managed primarily through his private investment firm, Cascade Investment, an entity that channels his wealth into industries as varied as railroads, waste management, luxury hotels, heavy equipment, agriculture, nuclear energy, food production, and cutting-edge climate technologies. This dual-track architecture of philanthropy on one side, strategic investing on the other, reflects Gates's lifelong commitment to systems thinking, the understanding that solving global problems requires not only grants and humanitarian aid, but robust markets, resilient supply chains, scalable innovations, and companies capable of doing well while doing good, a philosophy that threads through every branch of his empire. Through Cascade, Gates became one of the largest shareholders of Canadian National Railway, a stake that reveals his appreciation for infrastructure as the silent circulatory system of global commerce. And he also amassed significant positions in waste management firms, recognizing that environmental sustainability is inseparable from industrial efficiency. His investments in Four Seasons hotels and other hospitality ventures demonstrate a quieter facet of his portfolio, one driven by stability, brand strength, and long-term cash flow, rather than the rapid technological disruption that defined his Microsoft years. Meanwhile, his personal holdings in companies like Deere & Company underscore his belief that agricultural modernization, not just philanthropic grants to farmers, will be essential to feeding a growing global population in an age of climate, volatility, And this belief echoes through the Foundation's work in crop engineering, drought-resistant seeds, and improved farming tools for developing nations. Alongside these traditional sectors, Gates's portfolio also reflects an intensifying focus on climate innovation, an arena where he combines philanthropic vision with investment muscle through initiatives like Breakthrough Energy Ventures, a fund dedicated to scaling technologies that reduce greenhouse gas emissions across energy, industry, transportation, and agriculture. And this convergence of mission and money illustrates Gates's conviction that solving climate change requires not only activism, but capital, massive capital, flowing into the kinds of high-risk, long-gestation technologies that traditional investors shy away from. His climate investments span next-generation nuclear reactors through TerraPower, long-duration energy storage, green hydrogen systems, carbon capture startups, and industrial process innovations aimed at decarbonizing cement, steel, and chemicals, sectors responsible for the majority of global emissions, yet historically underfunded due to their technical difficulty and modest short-term returns. But even as Gates builds this sprawling investment ecosystem, his philanthropic decisions continue to follow a ruthless numerical logic. He and his foundation prioritize interventions that maximize lives saved, economic uplift, and long-term human flourishing per dollar spent, a framework that often leads him into areas other philanthropists overlook because they lack glamour or emotional appeal, such as sanitation technologies for low-income regions, mosquito control initiatives, vaccine cold chain logistics, and data-driven education reform. Critics often misunderstand this quantitative approach, accusing it of technocratic detachment. Yet to Gates, it represents a profound moral clarity that the highest duty of wealth is to alleviate suffering at scale, and that scale is achieved not through sentiment, but through relentless measurement, iteration, and scientific rigor. As Gates's fortune grew from tens of billions to over 100 billion, his commitment to structured giving deepened, culminating in the Giving Pledge, a movement he co-founded with Warren Buffett, urging billionaires to commit the majority of their wealth to philanthropy. And although critics debate the pledge's effectiveness, its symbolic power has reshaped global expectations of the ultra-wealthy, creating a cultural shift in which hoarding wealth is increasingly viewed as a failure of imagination. Yet behind the headlines and public speeches lies the quieter truth that Gates's approach to both philanthropy and investing is shaped by a deep intellectual discipline. He sees global health as an engineering problem, poverty as a systemic design issue, climate change as a technology scaling challenge, and wealth as a tool that becomes morally meaningful only when deployed with intention, precision, and accountability. As we explore these intertwined threads, his foundation's humanitarian reach, Cascade's strategic positioning, Breakthrough Energy's climate agenda, and the personal philosophy that binds it all together, we begin to see the deeper architecture of Gates's worldview, an architecture that becomes even more revealing as we approach the next dimension of his legacy, where the lines between philanthropy, investment, and technological futurism blur into a single overarching mission to redesign the systems that govern human potential. A mission whose deeper contours begin to crystallize as we trace how Gates integrates data, innovation, and capital into a unified, coherent engine of impact, capable of influencing global health outcomes, accelerating climate innovation, and reshaping economic opportunity for millions of people who may never know his name. And as we move into the next dimension of Bill Gates's philanthropy and investment worldview, we begin to see how his strategy operates, not as a set of isolated programs, but as an interconnected system designed to solve problems at scale by aligning incentives, capital, science, and human behavior. This systems-driven approach becomes especially evident when examining how Gates tackles global health, where the Gates Foundation does far more than write checks it funds vaccine research, partners with pharmaceutical companies, strengthens healthcare supply chains, and works alongside governments to ensure that breakthroughs reach the poorest communities, an intricate choreography reflecting his belief that scientific discoveries mean little unless they are paired with distribution networks strong enough to deliver their benefits across continents. Polio eradication provides one of the clearest examples. The foundation became a central player in the global effort to eliminate the disease, coordinating with WHO, UNICEF, and local governments to map outbreaks, support vaccine delivery, and combat misinformation. And even though complete eradication remains challenging, the massive reduction in global polio cases demonstrates Gates's emphasis on measurable outcomes rather than symbolic victories. The same systems thinking appears in his work on malaria, where Gates funds not only bed nets and drugs, but gene drive research, mosquito control technologies, and data analytics platforms designed to predict outbreaks, showing that he views disease not as an isolated event, but as an ecological and logistical challenge, requiring multi-layered intervention. Education reform, another major pillar of his philanthropy, reflects a similar blend of ambition and caution. Although critics say some early initiatives were overly optimistic, Gates has since shifted toward more data-driven approaches that emphasize curriculum quality, teacher support, and scalable digital learning tools, revealing a willingness to evolve his strategies when evidence contradicts expectations, a hallmark of his scientific mindset. And yet, even as he deploys billions in grant-based philanthropy, Gates's investment arm pursues parallel strategies designed to reinforce and sometimes accelerate the same long-term goals through profitable enterprises, demonstrating his belief that capitalism, when properly directed, can be a powerful force for progress. Through Cascade Investment, he maintains significant stakes in waste management, energy infrastructure, agricultural modernization, and industrial efficiency sectors that directly align with the Foundation's priorities of climate resilience, sustainable growth, and resource optimization, revealing a tight philosophical coherence between where he gives and where he invests. Breakthrough Energy Ventures, BEV, sits at the center of this duality, operating as both a mission and a market engine. Its portfolio includes companies working on long-duration energy storage, direct air capture, carbon-neutral fuels, clean industrial processes, geothermal power, and grid optimization technologies. Ideas that may require decades to reach profitability but hold the potential to decarbonize entire sectors of the global economy. While most venture capital firms avoid such long gestation technologies due to their risk profiles, BEV intentionally targets them because Gates sees climate change as a mathematical reality. Emissions must reach net zero, and this will not happen without innovations capable of addressing the hardest, dirtiest, most energy-intensive parts of the global system. TerraPower. For example, Gates's advanced nuclear company pursues next-generation reactors designed to be safer, cheaper, and more flexible than conventional nuclear power, reflecting his belief that the world cannot meet climate goals without massive increases in clean, reliable energy. Meanwhile, his agricultural investments ranging from precision fertilizer systems to drought-resistant crops and sustainable livestock technologies support his view that solving food insecurity requires marrying biology, data science, and supply chain modernization, especially as climate pressures intensify. And woven through these philanthropic and investment strategies is a deeper intellectual thread. Gates's belief in measurability, the idea that real progress requires quantification, iteration, and transparency. Whether funding vaccine trials, climate startups, or educational pilots, he pushes for metrics, dashboards, and independent evaluations, insisting that emotion and good intentions must yield to evidence when determining what works. Yet his philosophy is not purely technocratic. Gates increasingly emphasizes equity, access, and human development, recognizing that breakthroughs matter only when they benefit those who are most vulnerable. This ethical dimension emerges clearly in his recent shift toward prioritizing women's health, maternal care, and financial inclusion, areas he long overlooked but now views as central levers for lifting entire populations. In the later phase of his career, Gates's worldview has also been shaped by introspection, public criticism, and evolving geopolitical realities. He acknowledges mistakes, particularly in education reform, and adapts his strategies accordingly, demonstrating a rare willingness among public figures to revise beliefs when confronted with new evidence. As he steps further into global climate diplomacy, he works with governments, multilateral institutions, and corporations, arguing that philanthropy alone cannot solve systemic problems. Only coordinated policy, massive capital investment, and technological transformation can produce the scale required to ensure sustainable progress. What emerges from this multifaceted journey is a portrait of a man who sees wealth not as a symbol of achievement, but as a tool for engineering the future, a tool that becomes meaningful only when used to solve foundational challenges that affect humanity at its roots. The ultimate lesson from Bill Gates's Philanthropy and Investment Portfolio is that long-term impact arises from the marriage of capital, science, and systems thinking, and that lasting global change demands a willingness to confront problems with patience, rigor, and moral clarity. In understanding this, we see that Gates's legacy will not be measured solely by the billions he donates or the technologies he funds, but by the structural improvements he helps create across health, climate, and human development improvements that will continue compounding long after he is gone, reshaping the future for generations in ways far more profound than the software empire with which his story first began.